Hello and welcome to a very special episode of Knickerbocker Banter. I'm your host, Harris Wishard. Today with me, the voice of the Knicks, the voice of the NBA, Emmy Award winner and Hall of Famer Mike Breen. Thank you so much for joining the program.
Harris, I love the name Knickerbocker Banter, which is not easy to say. And I think I've spent most of my adult life in Knickerbocker Banter.
Should you think I maybe shorten it a little bit? Bocker
No,
Banter. I thought about that.
it's perfect the way it is. It's perfect.
Well, I just wanted to talk briefly about a couple interactions I had with you. First saw you at a Hofstra class where you came to speak. And obviously that was a big thrill for me. And then came up to you at a game in 2012, and you just couldn't have been nicer to me. Gave me some words of encouragement. We spoke on the phone. I know you speak to a lot of people, but for me, the humility was something that I took with me and said, wow, this is a guy that has reached the pinnacle of his career and someone I looked up to growing up. You know, they say don't meet the people you look up to. And that's always stuck with me over the years as I've tried to pursue the things that I love. And obviously wanted to thank you for that.
Well, Harris, you're quite welcome. But that Hofstra class was for years run by a man named Ed Ingles, who was like that for me. He was one of the premier New York sportscasters, worked at WCBS for years. And then when he retired, he decided to put his knowledge and his experience and help out countless young broadcasters. And he had humility, he had class, he had everything. So he was a great role model for me. You know, it's the pay it forward thing. He was so good for me and for my career that he made me want to do the same thing for others.
Absolutely. And that's got to come from your family as well. I've listened to you talk about growing up with a lot of siblings and how, playing basketball and, in the backyard or whatever it was, and the bullying and the physicality, right? And is that where it stems from in terms of the love of the game, and where did that come from for you, where it became basketball over everything else?
Yeah, I was one of six boys in my family, no girls, unfortunately. But when you're one of six boys and you have a father who loves sports, your love of sports is not an option in the family. That becomes a family requirement. So, just grew up playing wiffle ball in the front yard. The joke around the neighborhood was that we were the only family that didn't have grass in our front yard because the wiffle ball games just destroyed any chance of growing grass. Wow. And my father's love of sports was passed down along to us. And, we were competitive and fun, and it just became an integral part of our lives. So, when I started thinking about what I wanted to do later in life, when I thought about going to college and what I would get into, sports was clearly something I wanted to be part of. I wasn't a good enough high school basketball or baseball player to go to the collegiate level, so I figured I'd try something else.
Well, you mentioned college, and I know you went to Fordham, and I've heard some stories of you talking about being shy, giving introverted people everywhere hope, that eventually you'll develop some sort of confidence and be able to do it on the big stage. But how were you able to break out of that shell to succeed on the level you have?
Harris, this was, I've told this story before. When I was a student at Fordham, I joined the college radio station. Basically, that's why I went to Fordham, because it had this great reputation for college students to become broadcasters. But I was extremely introverted back then. And, to the point where in between classes, if I had an 8:30 class and an 11:30 class, in between the classes, I would go sit in my car in the parking lot rather than go to the cafeteria, because I didn't want to sit there by myself. I didn't know a lot of people, a little intimidated. And I felt really intimidated when I would go to all these seminars at the college radio station for the freshmen. They would have the freshmen, and the seniors would teach the freshmen the classes, the ropes, the whole thing. But I just felt so overwhelmed and intimidated that I contemplated maybe this wasn't for me. And I was rescued by one other fellow student. He was a sophomore, so he was already comfortable. And he brought me into his inner circle. And all of a sudden, I went from having one friend in him to about 10 friends, because he had people all around him. And the person I'm speaking about is Michael Kay, who is just a spectacular announcer, been the Yankee announcer for decades. And he really turned things around. He he kind of brushes it off. But if it wasn't for him, I may not have stuck with it. But he made me stick with it because now I felt I had a group of friends at the radio station that made me much more comfortable.
Incredible. And I'm sure you guys have, you said you stayed close and talk about how incredible it is that you had Fordham you had met and now become, the voice of prominent New York sport teams.
Yeah, he's. I was texting with him last night. He's a lifetime friendship. He's so special to me, and we've been able to help each other throughout the years. We've been able to support and encourage each other. And I tell this story too. We would sit in the cafeteria, and we would all this try and think about, okay, if you had your ideal job, what would that be? And I always said, I'd love to be the Knick announcer. And he would say, oh, I'd like to be the Yankee announcer. And the rest of our friends would say, oh, you two idiots, what are you talking about? So it's something that we've done together. We've grown up together. We've achieved some success in the business together. So it's a very special friendship for me.
Wow. And, I have to bring up the Hudson Valley area. I played college basketball at SUNY New Paltz. So when I saw that you had started your career in Poughkeepsie and then have in what you did at Marist for the play-by-play, how did those years shape who we see today on our screens?
Well, first, when I got my first job up in Poughkeepsie, I was doing news. I was a news reporter for a local AM station. I used to cover stories at New Paltz every once in a while. But that really shaped me doing that because it forced you to really concentrate on the subject matter. I would, go to different stories and have no idea what the subject matter was. And it made you really have to kind of research it, made you have to think of questions that might be pertinent to the particular story, as opposed to go and cover a sporting event, which, we all know, we all love, we're all comfortable with. So it got me out of my comfort zone. So that really helped. But when I got the Marist College job, the athletic director, a man named Brian Caleri, hired me. I wasn't the play-by-play guy for Marist. I was the color analyst. Huh. And the only reason I think he hired me because I was the color analyst is my high school basketball team in Westchester, Salesian High, played against his team. He was a basketball coach. So we had a long history, and he hired me. And the play-by-play guy, Harris, was a guy named Dean Darling. And Dean is very well known in the Hudson Valley. He'd been doing Army football forever. And I really learned TV play-by-play from Dean Darling because the only thing I'd done prior to that was radio play-by-play as a Fordham student. So to have a bunch of years with a guy who was so good, and Dean could have been, in my opinion, a network announcer, but he loved his life in the Hudson Valley. He had a side job. He did Army football. He did Marist basketball, and he really showed me the proper way to do TV play-by-play.
Well, you never made your way over to the Mohawk Mountain and all that stuff over there that people talk about all the time. I still go back once a year. I love it.
Yeah, no, it's such a beautiful area. I've gone back a couple of times. In fact, I'm supposed to go this fall to go speak to some Marist College students. I want to make sure I get up there for that. I had such great memories up there. When I was a news reporter covering pretty much anything, they had a huge fight at boxing card at the Mid-Hudson Civic Center. And it was one of the biggest sporting events in the history of Poughkeepsie. And Billy Costello was the WBC light heavyweight champion from nearby Kingston. So he was the main event. And we were all psyched to go and see Billy Costello. And for me, it was the first sporting event I was ever going to cover. But Costello broke his hand in training about 2 weeks before. But they had sold all the tickets, so they didn't cancel the fight card. And the promoter was calling anybody who was going to come and cover it, like myself, and say, hey, listen, we got this young heavyweight. We think he's going to be really good. He's going to be the main event now. Please still come, even though Costello's not there. And of course, I was going to go no matter who was fighting. And we went and covered. And this young heavyweight, it was his sixth professional fight, and he won in a knockout. And afterwards, I went down to the locker room and I spoke with him and his trainer and his manager for like an hour by myself in their locker room. And it was Mike Tyson. It was Tyson's sixth professional fight. And it just to be able to have that and meet him, and Kevin Rooney was there and Customato was there. I had no idea that Tyson was going to become what he became. But it was just such an unbelievable experience. So all my time up there was, I have such great memories from.
Wow, that's great. And you know what? I really wanted to ask you about your preparation and what goes into game days. Now, a new class is coming in, right, with rookies and teams are changing coaches. What kind of level of preparation do you do on a game day or weeks leading up, or what's kind of been your process and what's gotten you comfortable and so confident going into these broadcasts?
Well, Harris, what you just said, the last part is the key. The way you're comfortable, the way you're confident when you get on the air is by that preparation. The preparation is the key to everything. If you feel like you're prepared for everything going into a game, all you have to worry about is calling it, not worry about did I cover enough, did I get enough? And right now, there is so much information available out there.
Mm.
You could spend 10 hours reading and looking at stats and reading articles on every single game you do. You have to cut it off. When I first started and I was doing NBA, say Knicks radio, you'd fly into a city, you'd grab the local paper. So we went to Charlotte, Knicks were playing the Hornets.
Mhm.
You'd grab the Charlotte Observer and scan to see if you could get any information. There was no internet, there was nothing. And you had to get it by getting to the arena early and talking to as many people as possible. You didn't have that unbelievably amount of great material. But this is what I try and do this to make it a shorter answer. When I do an NBA game, NBA players, there are 13 players activated for every game. I want to make sure that I have enough information, both statistic wise and personal wise, and history of their career for all 13 players. In case that one player could be the star player, could be the 13th player, has the game of his life.
Mm.
So I want to be able to, if that person has the game of his life, I want to have enough stuff to properly document that player's history. And that's kind of how I go into it. And quite honestly, and I'm sure you know this, Harris, when you do a preparation for a game, you probably only get 15% of the material studied, but you have to have the other just in case something happens. You never can tell what's going to happen. I might have 5 great stories for Jalen Brunson that night, but what if Jalen Brunson gets 3 fouls in the first quarter and only plays 12 minutes? Well, then you don't force those stories in. You have to get the stories of his backup, who all of a sudden has this great game because he plays 35 minutes. So that's to me, that's kind of the guide for me, is make sure no matter who's playing that night, if they have that career night, I have enough information to properly document it.
Well, being a Knick fan for about 28 years now, when you said random player going off, I think my PTSD kicked in for all the bench players that have hurt this franchise over the years, when people on Knicks Twitter talk about, who is this guy? How is this guy hitting 5 or 6 threes on us? But, to your credit, you always have the information to provide us, whether it's a good result or bad for the Knicks.
Yeah, that's the whole idea is, when you sit down to call a game, that you're going to be. I look for 3 things when I sit down to call a game. Number one, I want the viewer to say, okay, this guy's prepared. He knows what he's talking about. You can clearly see he's researched it. So that's number one. Number two, I want it to be where the viewer says, boy, he loves basketball. You can just tell that he loves basketball by the way he's calling a game. And number 3, you want them to say about the analyst that's working with you, boy, he seems to really like his color analyst. And I think those are the 3 things. If you achieve those 3 things for the viewer, I think you're doing your job.
Well, I did a deep dive on YouTube the other day and found a clip from 1997. It was you and Johnny Hoops at a preseason game at Nassau Coliseum, and the energy is still the same. Do you feel your drive and your love is the same in 2025 as it was in the mid 90s doing a game like that?
I hope so. I feel that way. I hope the viewer feels that way. It's because I still love the game so much. That's what has always driven me with basketball ever since I was a kid. I've had this love affair with the game. And part of the reason I love basketball so much is because of the team aspect. There is nothing more beautiful than seeing ball movement lead to an easy bucket, or at the other end of the floor, help defense lead to a turnover that leads to a transition layup. I just love when you can put 5 people together, and if they're operating on the string, they can beat five other people who might be more talented but don't play as well together. And that's what drew me to the game. And what's so cool, Harris, is that broadcasting basketball is the same way. You rely on so many people when you're calling a game, and not just your analysts or two analysts who are sitting next to you, your statistician, the producer, the director, the camera people, the graphics people, the sound people. I mean, it's such a team sport from a broadcasting standpoint. So when you finish a broadcast and you think it goes well, there's something so satisfying about, all right, we put this all together as a team and did service for the viewer out there.
Yeah, definitely. I had Alan Hahn a couple weeks ago, and he made the analogy of being a quarterback out there, being a point guard. I know you've talked about that before. I've heard you say that, where you feel responsible for how we're going to succeed together. And when you're working alongside some great people, it's easy. And obviously want to lead into your relationship with Clyde, because I know, and I've watched interviews with you guys, and you say, hey, this is Walt Clyde Frazier. This is someone I idolized growing up. Knick fans love this guy, and I got to give him the floor. I got to be the Chris Paul. I got to, make sure that Clyde gets his, 2 cents in it, and people might want to even hear him more than they want to hear me. I've heard you say that as well.
Right. I mean, and TV is very different than radio. When you play-by-play for radio, you're in charge. You're the one that has the picture to the listener. But radio, when you go to TV, then the play-by-play, to put it simply, is the what happened, and the color analyst is why it's happening. And I said that from Clyde. I was so intimidated to work with Clyde at first. The first thing I said to him was, "Listen, Clyde, people want to hear what you have to say. So this is your platform to inform and obviously entertain the viewers." And chemistry in a booth is funky sometimes. Sometimes it's instant. Most times it takes a while to get to that point where you're so comfortable with each other. But for some reason, and I can't explain it, Clyde and I hit it off right away. Obviously, it's gotten better over time. It's one of the true blessings of my life to first start meeting Clyde Frazier, who was one of my idols, then to be a co-worker, then to be his partner, and then to have a friendship this long with the man is it's truly special. I've said this a million times. When I was about 10 years old, my brothers and I, we hung up a poster of Clyde in our house. And it's a house that my mother, who's still alive, she's 93, she still lives there in the same house, and the poster is still up.
Incredible. Has Clyde ever seen a picture of it, or he knows? I'm sure he knows about it, obviously, but
he didn't see me. And then when I showed it to him, he said, "How did you able to get the dart holes at it?" Because he says I was throwing darts picture all the time. But yeah, no, I showed him the picture.
You guys are having so much fun on these broadcasts. I mean, do you think, and I mean this obviously in a non-serious manner, be able to get through a season with Richard Jefferson this year?
He is so much fun to work with. I've known him since he was a player. And, when you knew when he was a player that he was going to be in some form of the media, because he's got such an outgoing personality. He's a very welcoming person. And he loves basketball, loves basketball. And that's always fun when you're working with somebody and off the air, all they want to talk about is basketball and their experiences. And he's been fun like that. But we always have to be careful. There's always a little worry about he might say something.
I think he made I was watching the preseason game the other night, taking a shot at your age or something. I think he was making a joke. I said, Richard Jefferson's got to watch it, man. He'll have he's had Knick fans on his back a little bit on social media already. So, I know. I saw him at the Garden. He does seem like a very nice guy. And also this edition of Legler, I've been a huge fan of his for a long time. And I think he brings so much from a knowledge standpoint. What are your thoughts on getting to work with him this season?
Yeah, I've been admiring him for years when he was on Sports Center, and he worked with Scott Van Pelt. The two of them were so good together and breaking down things. He's of the UB Brown, Doug Collins type of analysis, really, really studies, student of the game, understands what's happening out on the floor, and that will be fun. And Richard and Tim will will take some time to get their chemistry going, but already they're good together. And the thing with Richard, this might sound like an obvious thing. You have to listen all times because you don't know what he's going to say. But that used to happen years ago when I worked with the late great Bill Walton. You had to listen because he might say something so wacky that you had to either counter it or agree with it or question him on it. And Richard has that potential too to say something that's a little off the wall once in a while, like Bill was. And Bill was one of the all-time greats with stuff like that. He just made it entertaining because that's what you have to try and do, Harris. Obviously, from a basketball standpoint, you want to document what's going out there, but you also want to entertain. And if it sounds like you're having fun during the broadcast, as a viewer, I enjoy that when I'm listening to a broadcast team and they're having fun with each other. I worked with Mark and Jeff Van Gundy and Mark Jackson for years. And, that we had such a long time to develop the chemistry. And so we were able to have fun. And I think that's important in no matter what booth. There are times for the fun and there are times to concentrate on the game. And you have to find that balance.
Well, and you brought up a name, another one I obviously mentioned, Legler, but Hubie Brown, you being able to be a part of his last game doing color and how emotional you were. And you could tell how much he meant to you. And me and my friends growing up loved, he was a coach in the 80s before my time, but loved listening to him talk about the game of basketball. It almost like biblical in a way, the way he was able to speak about it. He just seemed like even a better person too.
It might be the honor of calling that game, his final game, might be my favorite telecast of all time because he's meant so much to me and to basketball fans. First, just from strictly as an NBA fan, but the personal relationship and how much he's taught me and encouraged me to be there and make that particular game special for him. And that's all everybody, and it wasn't just me. There was so many people that worked on that game. Ian Grucker, who was the producer, spent months preparing for that game because we all felt the same way. We wanted to honor this man who's given us so much. I think I said it on the telecast. I'm pretty confident that he has taught basketball to more people than anybody who's ever lived. And for us to give him that day, and a day that he enjoyed, and he has expressed to me multiple times how much that day meant to him and how wonderful he felt it went. That is as satisfying an event as I've ever been a part of. And all of us on the crew that day felt the same way.
Yeah, that was an amazing day. And also, I can't think of a high shooting percentage without Hubie coming to mind. When he said he's loved talking about, he had his phrases as well as obviously, working with Clyde is the same way. But what stuck out to me one time, Mike, is you seemed like, listen, all the telecasts have gone well for you, most of them, but you were critical of yourself on a Tatum call. And you could have this unbelievable career and then still, feel a certain way about, being, a harsh critic on yourself. Is that something that you've done? And sometimes if, I guess that's what got able for you to get to that level of being, all right, I want everything to go so well. And when one thing doesn't go well at the end of the game, that it hurts you a little bit.
Well, first off, Harris, there's no such thing as a perfect broadcast. I make mistakes every single night. And in many cases, the viewer won't know it, but I know it. And that never changes. And when you're on live television night after night and for 2.5 hours, it's bound to happen. Clearly, some mistakes are worse than others. Some are minor little slip-ups, misidentification. Others are a badly blown call at a critical time. And that was the Tatum thing. It was game one of the playoffs. And what bothered me so much on that one was that, going back to the team aspect, I thought we had one of our best telecasts of the year that day. And it just, everything was clicking from the guys in the truck to the replays, to the stats, to the commentary. It just, everything was going great. This exciting game to open up the playoffs. And my sight line wasn't good and I blew the call and I blew it badly. So I was upset, first off, just for the viewer, but also I was upset for the crew because we had such a big, again, to me, was a terrific telecast. So I didn't sleep that night. I was upset. but you learn to, okay, you got to learn from your mistakes. So I learned from that and you move on to the next game. When you're earlier in your career, instead of not sleeping that night, you don't sleep for 5 nights. Then as you get going, maybe it's 4 nights. So
Yeah.
you understand the process of the game, but you put so much work into it and you work with so many talented people that you want to make it right for them. And most importantly, you want to document it to honor the players and what they've accomplished, and you want to get it right for the viewers who are clearly spending their time in front of the television watching it. So that's the way it goes. But I would always say that to any young broadcaster, you're going to make mistakes every game. Don't let it, go forward all the time, and don't play backwards. That was a phrase. The first time I heard the phrase, Jerry Sloan was the Jazz coach, and I asked him what made John Stockton so special.
Hmm.
And his comment to me was, he never plays backwards. So if Stockton misses a wide open three, he doesn't care next time he's down the floor. He's still taking that three. If Stockton tries to thread the needle on a pass and makes a turnover, he's not kicking himself. Does he glad he did it? Obviously not. But he's going to try and make that same great pass the next time. And that's what you have to do. And it does get easier as you get older.
Hmm.
But it's still, I think every broadcaster will tell you, if they blow a big call, it's really hard to sleep that night.
Well, yeah, you're holding yourself to that standard, and it shows, right, in what we're able to hear from you. But you told a story on the air one time that's always stuck with me, where you ran into a fan, and they had said, "Hey, Mike, we know that the team stinks. You don't have to keep telling us that." And the reason why it struck me is because I think you had said you may have adjusted in a way that you were calling the game. Do you think that has shaped you in terms of the fan interactions and how that's affected your call and the conversations you have with us?
You know what it was, Harrison? For those who had never heard the story, the Knicks had a good long stretch where they were a bad basketball team. And this particular year, it was rough. And, you can't sugarcoat that, especially in New York. New York fans want you to tell them the truth.
Yep.
So we were pretty harsh on them, and because they're not good. They weren't playing well. And when I came out, fan was probably, I'm going to say, around 30 or so. And he said to me, he asked me, he goes, "Can I ask you a question?" And I said, "Sure." And he did it in such a respectful way. He says, "Why do you hate the Knicks?" I said, "Hate the Knicks? I've been a Knicks fan since I was about 6 years old." He says, "But you're crushing them every night."
Hmm.
I said to him, "Well, they're terrible. What do you want me to say?" He goes, "No, no, no, I get that." He goes, "I know you got to get that." He said, "But the people that are watching in March and April, when they're 40 games out of a playoff spot," he goes, "we're still watching because we love our team. And you don't have to hit me over the head every possession with how bad they are."
Hmm.
And it struck me, you know what? The viewers at that particular time, the Knicks fans, yeah, they knew the team was bad. So, yes, you had to address how poorly they were playing, but there were other things that you could do to serve the viewer. And that's basically what we're doing it for. We're there to serve the viewer. And it made me adjust a little bit. And just a good reminder that as much as I have a certain priority that I want to get out on the air that night, the key is, am I serving the viewers the way I'm supposed to? Because that's our number one responsibility, is to serve the viewer. And it was a great reminder for me that, okay, yeah, you got to be critical when you have to be, but you don't have to be overcritical. You also have to mix it up with positives and optimism as well, especially on those local broadcasts.
Well, you said something on the Roommates show as well. That was a great episode, by the way. I love watching you interact with Hart and Brunson. And I think you had said something of somebody goes 0 for 9 or someone has a rough game. There are ways that I could phrase it where I don't have to come off as if I'm being, as you just said, overcritical, and in between the line of, maybe too overly optimistic. You said the word sugarcoating. There's that fine line, right? And I feel like you've been able to really balance that, better than anybody. I'm biased, obviously, as a Knicks fan, but you're on the national broadcast as well, not necessarily feeling like you have to be overly negative.
Right. To me, being critical is part of the job. I
Mm.
wish it wasn't part of the job, but it is. But as long as you're respectful in your criticism, there's two ways to say everything. And I've chosen to try and always say it in the most respectful way. Just like if somebody's criticizing my work on a game, they could say, "Boy, he's had an off night tonight." Or they could say, "Boy, he is just disgraceful tonight." performance is disgraceful. There's two ways. You're saying the same thing. So if a player goes 1 for 12, man, he's really struggling tonight. Or you could be harsh and try and like, well, look at me, look how tough I am on the players. There's no need for that. The amount of work they put into their job, they're not trying to miss all their shots. Yes, you can be critical, but do it in a respectful way.
Yeah. And also, can you tell the people who haven't heard it, the Allen Iverson exchange? I think that's a fascinating one too, where he had said something to a fan
Yeah.
and obviously let you tell it, but I think that's a real interesting one as well.
It was a game in Indiana. Sixers were playing the Pacers, and he dove for a loose ball, and his momentum carried him into that first row. And there was a guy there with a kid, and Allen got up and he something profane to the guy, and it was right there. So I criticized him on the air. And next game we did, I think we even had him like only a few days later. I had a chance to see him, and he said, listen, he goes, I know what you said, but I just want to let you know, if you heard what the guy said to me in front of his kid, he goes, maybe you'd think differently about going after me. You should go after the guy. And when he told me what the guy said to him, it was, it's disgusting and disgraceful. And it did make me think, okay, there are two sides to every story, and that's what you have to do. It's kind of like when a player gets a technical foul, and the commentator will say, what's the ref giving him a technical foul for there? Come on, please let him play, or it's too important part of the game. You don't know what that player said. If the player said those magic words, the referee has no choice but to give that technical foul. So it was another good lesson in that there are two sides to every story sometimes, and you always have to balance that. And when you're broadcasting, like I wish in hindsight, boy, would have said, boy, Iverson out of line saying that, but you don't know what the man said to him. So that's kind of balance that sometimes I try and use after that story.
Well, when you were talking about the official stuff, what struck me as I'm coaching fourth graders these days in youth athletics, and I'm telling them, guys, run back on defense. We're not talking to the officials. And some of them will come back at me and say, well, look at this. And I say, well, when you make that amount of money and you're on TV, maybe the conversation can change. But, I'm hoping for a lot of sprinting back on defense from the Knicks this year. But I understand also that, healthy conversations have to be had. And, players are always going to disagree and there's going to be those conversations. But I know that's something that you focused on in terms of, maybe we can make it a little bit better in our game. But I feel like it's just always going to be there as well.
Right. But it's the same thing, Harrison, that if you do it in a respectful way, you can argue, you can get emotional, but just be respectful. And that's all. I mean, the officials are trying to get every call right, and that's not going to happen. And the players are trying to make every play right, and that's not going to happen. So the emotions can run high just as long as you keep it in a respectful manner.
Yeah, and I also definitely have to ask you about the heave rule, which I'm going to call the Mike Breen rule because I've heard you talk about it so often. I thought you had something to do with it when I first heard. Maybe you were in the meetings when they were coming up with this thing. But now that, or who doesn't know who's listening, that shots, at the end of the first, second, third quarter under a certain amount of time, from a certain distance are going to go team field goals if they miss instead of individual field goals, which is something you've been adamant about over the years.
I've complained about it ad nauseam. It drives me crazy. It's such a selfish thing for them to do because they want to protect their 3-point percentage as opposed to maybe giving their team a chance to get 3 points on an exciting play at the end of a period. So I hate the reason for the rule, but I'm going to love the result of it because now we'll have those plays. The league did. They said that it was probably about 500 times last season where at the end of a quarter, a player waited for the buzzer to sound before they threw up the heave to protect their 3-point percentage. And there'll be several hundred now of those plays that are going to happen because they're not worried about it. And I just, two of the greatest players in the game, Steph Curry and Nikola Jokic, they'll always take that heave, and they don't care what their 3-point, if their percentage goes down. All their concern is maybe I'm going to make this and help my team. Now, to balance it, there are some players who have in their contracts, if they shoot 40% from three, they get a bonus. So, from that financial implication, maybe you can understand it. I hate the fact that that's there, but that might be the reason for some of them. But overall, I just felt it was a selfish thing to do because you have a chance to help your team with that. But I'm going to love the fact that we'll see a lot of those heaps. I just hate the fact that they had to put in that it's a team shot. That's ridiculous. It's
You think they heard you talking about it? They think they heard you talking about it a little bit?
I know I'm not the only one, but I pretty much hammered it home for years. So there's a part of me that's thrilled, and there's a part of me like, really? We had to make a rule change to get these guys to do it. But as long as it's there, I guess that's the bottom line.
Well, Mikal Bridges doesn't seem to have any problem with it.
No, absolutely not. No hesitation. There's a lot of guys like Peyton Pritchard.
Yeah,
he lives for those, for crying out loud. He almost
too many have gone in
down in the final seconds just so he could do it at the buzzer. And it's an exciting play if it goes in. So if that's the end result, that we get more of those, then it's going to be a positive.
Well, when I told a lot of my family and friends that I was going to be speaking with you, I'm sure you could imagine that a vast majority wanted me to reference Bang. And I know from listening to a lot of your interviews that it's a question that you get all the time. I think it's gotten to the point now where people are, they got their cameras out. Hey, Mike, can you say it for me? The new ESPN commercials got your face on it doing the Bang. But it's a great call. Don't get me wrong. I love it. And, in the Knicks being good recently, you had the Dante one and the Julius one. But now I personally think my favorite Knick call of, recent memory is Jalen Brunson born to play basketball. And I really wanted to ask you if that was somewhat predetermined. I think he was named an all-star around that time, but I think that is one of my personal favorites from you.
It's one of mine as well. A lot of it had to do with, the Knicks had gone, as you know, Harris, they'd gone through some rough patches for a long time. And when he came, he completely changed not only the direction of the franchise, but the perception of the franchise. He has completely turned it around with his play, with his leadership, with the way he carries himself. And he's meant so much to New York, the Knicks fans. And I had thought of using the line because when I sit at home and I watch a game and I watch how other announcers handle it, sometimes I think, oh, that's a perfect line there, or would work here. And you think of things and you jot them down. And that was something I had jotted down and was going to use at some point in a big moment. I didn't predetermine that it was going to be Brunson. It just seemed to that particular time. But it was a phrase that I was hoping to use. And I thought because of what he meant to New York, and it was a local telecast, I thought that would work well. And it was they were on such a great run then, and he was playing out of his mind. So that's one of my favorites, Harris, for sure.
Yeah, no, definitely one that will give you the chills. And, I obviously know you have a busy schedule with the NBA season coming up shortly, so I'm not going to take up too much more of your time, but I definitely want to touch on what's going on with the New York Knicks franchise right now, which is excited, the anticipation and the coaching change, and now, a real finals or bust mentality, which is, as I told you, a fan since the late 90s. We really haven't experienced. What's your level at right now in terms of what you're looking forward to the most as the Knicks get ready to play basketball in a couple weeks?
Well, there's hope that they can win a championship. And if you said that, even in the last few years, people would be like, slow down, easy does it. But there is hope there because, they showed they're one of the best teams in the league. They have some continuity now on the roster. You forget, last year was Karl Anthony Towns and Mikal Bridges. It was their first year with and Anunoby his first full year. So they've each had a whole year together, and continuity is the most underrated part of success in the NBA. Now the coaching change is a big factor here. Clearly, we know Tom Thibodeau's a great coach, and he did a great job. And we went the farthest. The Knicks went the farthest they did, in 25 years. and he plays a certain way, and he's got a certain style as a coach. Now you bring in a new coach who plays a different way and has a complete different style. So it's an unknown. It's hard to predict. Obviously, the organization feels that this is the move that will make them better and take the next step. So we don't know. Will that happen? Will they be just as good as under Thibodeau? Will they not be as good? You always take a chance when you make a coaching change. Mike Brown, though, has seen it all. I've known Mike Brown since he was an assistant at San Antonio. He's not only a terrific coach, but he's got great people skills as well. And that might be the new thing that gets him over the hump. That's clearly what the Knicks feel, that Tom Thibodeau, as great a job as he did, they felt that that's as far as he can take him. Well, we're going to find out because now Mike Brown is here, and can he be the one to help them take the next step? It's a lot of pressure, but he's been under a lot of pressure in a lot of places that he's been. So it's going to be fascinating to see how his changes impact the team. So far, the players seem really receptive to some of the new things that he wants to do. But the bottom line is the roster, what Leon Rose has done has been amazing. And now, not only do the Knicks have a terrific roster, it's now a destination that players now want to come to New York. For years, that wasn't the case. So now with this roster and the way the league is set up this year, there's a real chance that the Knicks can be playing for a championship in June.
Absolutely. And can you believe 34 nationally televised games for the Knicks, which is tied for the most in the NBA? I think it was only a few years ago when they had 3 or 4. And that, they play on Christmas, and we've come a long way in a short period of time. So I know, getting you on the call for some of those is going to be exciting. I want to make sure I mention, because I'm in a couple different Knick chats, like got the LFGK and the Chatrick Ewing, and we're all fired up. And something I always write in those is like, what are you guys doing? The game's on MSG, because they'll go to, whether it was TNT or something else, like, we got our local broadcast, when they do the multi broadcast. So I know you're excited about the 34, because that could mean a lot of those ESPN, ABC, where you're still able to do the Knicks as well.
Yeah, no, it just shows you again where the franchise is right now. I do, this coming from somebody who does national broadcasts does not sound odd, but the local broadcasts are so important to me and my fellow local broadcasters who put so much effort and work into it. You hate that often so many of the biggest games are on national TV. Now, that's the way the business is. ESPN, now NBC and Amazon, they're paying a fortune to televise these games, and they want exclusivity. But I wish there was some way to figure out where fans could still get their local broadcast on some of these big. Obviously, not all of them, but it's because that's who we grow up. If I'm listening to, I'm a huge Met fan, so I love my local broadcast.
Me too.
And when I was growing up, I listened to Marv and John for years, and that's what I love to listen to. So it's hard sometimes for the local fans, because the national broadcasters can't possibly have the same insight and corporate knowledge of the team as the local ones. The local ones are there night in and night out. And so I was a little sad to hear that, for example, the first round of the playoffs, broadcasters could always do the first round. Now that's gone. And that really is a shame. I thought the league should have somehow figured out a way to let the local broadcasters maintain that first round games, because there's such a bond between the local broadcasters and the fans. It's almost like part of the family. Again, for me, growing up, listening to Bob Murphy as a kid, call Met games, and for example, now Bob Papa, who does the Giants, I'm a big Giant fan. I love to hear him. There's such a connection between the local broadcasters and the fans that I hope that doesn't go away, because it's too important. It's such a big part of building that love affair that you have with your local team.
Definitely. We're both Knick, Giant, and Met fans. We had an unfortunate close to this past baseball season, Mike.
Yeah.
That wasn't fun. Yeah, but I'm trying to remember, 99, you're on radio. Were you doing that series? Did you cover it?
No. You mean the finals?
The finals, yeah. Sorry, I didn't want to specify, but the finals, the Knicks in the finals, yeah.
Yeah. No, that year I was doing local TV for the Knicks, and that year, the Knicks brought back Marv Albert, and
Mhm.
Marv was the radio announcer for the Knicks. So I was covering, I was doing pre and post game coverage for MSG. So I was there and I was at every game. But unfortunately, I didn't get to call those. So that was
Mm.
the timing of that was not the best.
Well, I will tell you this: the NBA owes us, and this is no disrespect to Reggie Miller, listening to him to call the Knicks and Pacers series, but how special would it be for you to be able to call the Knicks in the NBA Finals?
Yeah, that would clearly mean a lot. And
Mm.
by the way, and I might be in the minority of this, I listen very closely,
Mhm.
obviously, every second of every game. And I thought Reggie did an excellent job of
Mm.
trying to remain neutral. Now, certain things emotionally, he spent his whole life with the Pacers. We
Right.
all knew who he wanted to win. But I thought his call on particular plays, on referee calls, I thought he did an excellent job of calling it down the middle with him and Kevin Harlan and Stan Van Gundy. So I give him credit because it's not easy, especially
Mhm.
the farther you go along to try and remain neutral. But I thought he did a wonderful job. And Kevin Harlan is one of my favorite people in the world. He's one of my favorite people in the business. And I haven't told this story too many times, but when the conference finals were set, Kevin called me, and he knows how much the Knicks mean to me and their history. He called me and told me that he would be willing to change our assignments, and that he would do that. He goes, I'll go to TNT and tell them, hey, let's do the Knicks and the Pacers, and maybe I'll do the Western Conference Finals for ESPN. And he even said, even if ESPN doesn't want me to do it, but TNT will let you do it, I'll let you do it. I mean, just think about that. It's the biggest games of the year for him in
Mm.
the TNT. And that's what went through his head because he knew how much it meant. First off, as a friend, I can't even begin to thank him for his, that offer is just off the charts. But
Mhm.
the other thing is that, from a professional standpoint, for that to be his thought. So I tell that story to let people know, and many people know already just what a special person Kevin Harlan was. But it wasn't the right thing to do. I had to do my job for ESPN, and he certainly had to do his job for TNT, and of course, he knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, we're just a couple games away from getting you, man. We almost we almost had
It
the
was
broadcast. And to the Reggie point, though, I think you might be right on necessarily the call, but this is the most painful loss. That game one, Halliburton, was probably the most painful basketball experience of my life as a Knick fan. There's others, obviously, that are up there in the 90s and other stuff. But, and then to watch Reggie and Halliburton have that moment, I guess maybe I'm just bitter about how that result went.
Yeah, no. As a Knick fan, that had to be difficult to watch.
Mm-hmm.
But he has a special relationship
Mm-hmm.
with Reggie. Was the star for years and years and years, the greatest player in Pacer history.
Mm-hmm.
Close, never won it, and he's been kind of a mentor to him. So it's very hard on a human standpoint to shut that emotion off.
Mm.
And here you watch this young man who just made the biggest shot of his life, or one of the biggest of life, because he made quite a few this year, and not want to celebrate with him. As a broadcaster, you have to try hard not to do it,
Mm-hmm.
but it's also difficult human emotion. Now, I could have done without the joke thing. I think, like, to me, that's a disrespectful
That
thing to
hurt,
an
man.
opponent, to say that somebody choked. It's not that anybody choked. It's just the other team played better.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so that part I didn't like, but I can understand Reggie's emotion from a standpoint of the team and the particular player who he has a real relationship with.
Absolutely. Just a couple more before we let you go, Mike. Are your coworkers afraid to get into shooting contests with you?
Well, it depends on the range. Outside of 18 feet, I'm not good, but inside of 18 feet, I'll match up with anybody. I was a very good free throw shooter,
Yeah.
where my athleticism on the rate. But no, I'm glad to challenge anybody from 18 feet in.
Yeah. No, I think I saw you take a shot. Was that during COVID? You had a video or something that came up.
Oh
I don't know
yeah,
if you were in your driveway or not, but the form looked pretty good there.
Yeah, no, that's the one thing I could do. I could shoot without range and without a defender on me. Now put a defender on me, and it's a whole ball game. That's why I'm broadcasting basketball and not playing basketball.
Well, before we go, I wanted to use one of your lines on you, and I know how humble you are, but Mike Breen being born to call basketball games. That was my thought when you had agreed to come on. And Knick fans and NBA fans are so fortunate you've been the soundtrack of our sport. And I know I could speak for everybody in my life that we just appreciate your incredible work because you've made everything better.
It's very humbling, Harris, to hear something like that. God has blessed me in more ways than I deserve. But to have this relationship with the Knicks fans and the NBA fans, and to be able to do this for so many years is beyond my wildest dreams. So thank you for the kind words.
Of course. So that's the Hall of Famer, Mike Breen. We appreciate everybody for listening. I'm your host, Harris Wishard. Thank you. Another episode of Knickerbocker Banter. Have a great day, everyone.